Here to induct Jackson Browne into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame inductee, Bruce Springsteen.
Thank you. I first met Jackson Browne in the early 70s. It was at the bitter end. I was brought down there by David Blue, a folk singer, after a set I did at Max's Kansas City. And on David Blue's word, Jackson was kind enough to let somebody he just met get up on stage and play a song during his set. And I watched Jackson play that night. He was accompanied by his great sideman, David Lindley. And I recollect them playing songs from Jackson's first album, Dr. My Eyes, Rock Me on the Water, Jamaica Say You Will, Song for Adam. They were great songs, directly written and sung in that pure emotional tone that I've always loved of Jackson's. As I listened that night, I knew that this guy was simply one of the best. Each song was like a diamond, and my first thought was, damn, he's good. And my second thought was, I need less words. And the emotions of all the music was right out there on the sleeve, and I've remained a major fan since then. I remember watching him that night. He was kind of quintessentially Californian. It was right down to, like, you know, the Lost Surfer haircut. Good-looking guy, great songwriter, and we became pretty friendly. So over the next few years, Jackson was gracious enough to let me open up at several of his gigs. Now, being a little competitive, the first thing I noticed was Jackson didn't have much of a show. He just stood there in the baggy jeans and the t-shirt, singing his serious songs. That was it. Being a little competitive, I also noticed that Jackson drew an enormous amount of good-looking women. Great-looking women who stood there staring at the stage, entranced. His hair was perfect, and that was something I aspired to myself. Both the hair and the women. So tonight, this is an looked at part of Jackson's work that I'd like to focus on for a moment. The great songwriting, all right, I could deal with that. I don't need to stand here tonight and dwell on the obvious. But the gals that came to the show, you see, what most people don't realize, and for me this was a big part of Jackson's rock and roll credentials, is that Jackson Browne was a bona fide rock and roll sex star. And my wife says he still is. He tried to hide it, but not too much, I guess. Now, being a little competitive, I also noticed that while the E Street Band and I were sweating our asses off for hours just to put some fannies in the seats, that obviously due to what must have been some strong homoerotic undercurrent in our music, we were drawing rooms filled with men. And not that great looking men either. Now, meanwhile, Jackson is drawing more women than an Indigo Girls show. So, now, it's true that Jackson wrote some of the most beautiful breaking up music, break your heart music of all. Sky Blue and Black, Linda Paloma, In the Shape of a Heart. I think that what drew women to Jackson, besides the obvious, was that they finally felt they were listening to a guy who knew as much about love as they did. And what drew men to Jackson, besides the obvious, I guess, was that when they listened to him, they realized that they knew more about love than they thought they did. In 70s post-Vietnam America, there was no album that captured the fall from Eden, the long, slow afterburn of the 60s, its heartbreak, its disappointments, Its spent possibilities better than Jackson's masterpiece, Late for the Sky. You know? It's just a beautiful body of work. It's essential in making sense of the times. Before the Deluge still gives me goosebumps, and it raises me to cause. Late for the Sky, when those car doors slam at the end of the record, they still bring tears. And there was no more searching, yearning, loving music made for and about America at the time. In this and so much of Jackson's writing, the slow, meticulous crafting of the songs, the thoughtfulness, Jackson was one of the first songwriters I'd met who demonstrated the value of thinking hard about what you were saying in your subject. While writing The Pretender, produced by unheralded genius John Landau, I would go to his house and he'd play me a verse. I would come back a month later, he would play me 2 more lines. The song would show up 2 albums later somewhere. He took his time, and whatever he's going to say tonight, I guarantee he's worked on it. But it was the condensed emotional power in each line of his great songs that was a result of that willingness to work and think hard. The meticulousness of craft, it was always matched and balanced by the deepness of soul. The Pretender, These Days, For Every Man, I'm Alive, Fountain of Sorrow, Running on Empty, For a Dancer, Before a Deluge. Now, I know the Eagles got in first, but let's face it, and I think Don Henley would agree with me, these are the songs they wish they'd written. I wish I'd written them myself, along with Like a Rolling Stone and Satisfaction. But Jackson's influence and his voice has always been his own. He's one of the few true activist musicians I've ever known. World in Motion, Looking East, Lives in the Balance. He followed his muse wherever it took him, risked his, and he paid whatever the cost. He's long put his mouth, his money, and his body where his politics are. Lives in the Balance sounds more urgent today than it ever did. The Beach Boys and Brian Wilson, they gave us California as Paradise. And Jackson Browne gave us Paradise Lost. Now, I always imagine, what if Brian Wilson, long after he'd taken a bite of that orange that the serpent offered to him, what if he married that nice girl and Caroline No? I always figured that she was pregnant anyway. And what if he moved into the valley and had 2 sons? One of them would have looked and sounded just like Jackson Browne. Cain, of course, would have been Jackson's brother-in-arms, Warren Zevon. We love you, Warren. But Jackson to me was always the tempered voice of Abel, toiling in the vineyards, here to bear the earthly burdens, confronting the impossibility of love, here to do his father's work. Jackson's work was really California pop gospel. Listen to the chord changes of Rock Me on the Water or Before the Deluge. It's gospel through and through. And I always thought that in our fall from Eden, besides the strains of physicality and the bearing of earthly burdens, our real earthly task was that an unbridgeable gap where a black hole was opened up in our ability to truly love one another. And so our job here on earth and the way we regain our divinity, our sacredness, and our general good standing is by reconstructing love and creating love out of the broken pieces that we've been given. That's all we have of human promise. And the way we prove ourselves, that's the way we prove ourselves in the eyes of God and facilitate our own redemption. Now, to me, Jackson Browne's work was always the sound of that reconstruction. So as he writes in The Pretender, we'll put our dark glasses on and we'll make love till our strength is gone. And when the morning light comes shining in, we'll get up and do it again. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming my very handsome friend, Jackson Browne, into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.